Amidst the majestic scenery of Druid Mountain, a giant moose stood with solemn dignity in a field of pure white flowers near the summit, creating a beautiful natural scene. In the quiet space filled only with the chirping of birds and the rustling of dry leaves, the moose silently observed its surroundings with dark, gleaming eyes that reflected the peace of the pristine fields. Hiding among the white flowers, the protagonist was utterly terrified when a moose leaned its head in close, forcing him to tighten his grip on the knife in his hand for self-defense. A flower petal fell along with a fluttering butterfly, creating a soft sound that led the way to a peaceful village nestled at the foot of the mountain amidst the rustling wind. The villagers gathered around the corpse of the just-defeated beast, breathing a sigh of relief that Ichi had eliminated the great threat, allowing them to cross the mountain safely. While a grateful old man handed him a pouch of reward money, Ichi happily accepted it with a radiant smile on his face. The protagonist let out a hearty laugh, boasting that it was worth the 6-hour ambush and nearly getting hit by bird droppings to take down the monster. But the surrounding crowd only responded with amused looks at his story. As the old couple waved goodbye and reminded the two girls to write letters home, a boy suddenly ran up from behind, shouting for them to wait a moment. Ichi caught up to the carriage, surprising the two girls inside who thought he was also leaving, but he calmly explained that he had just come down from the mountain that morning. While the group of students was excited about going to the capital for a competition, the protagonist naively called the school by the wrong name, causing the girl beside him to shout in anger, but he remained indifferent, thinking he would never go there anyway. The villagers enthusiastically brought rabbit meat and dried goods as provisions for Ichi and his companion, leaving the girl flustered while Ichi looked at her with a steady, meaningful gaze. The short-haired girl kindly tried to persuade the young man to come live with the villagers, saying everyone was very fond of him and advising him to only go up the mountain when he needed to hunt. However, the protagonist firmly refused with a gentle smile, asserting that he would continue to stay on the mountain as he still had unfinished wishes in that wilderness. The boy cheerfully shook hands in farewell and accepted wishes to take care before setting off enthusiastically, leaving the short-haired girl to watch quietly from a distance with a contemplative look in her eyes. Watching Ichi's departing figure, the bearded uncle thoughtfully told the girl that advising him was useless, because Ichi belonged to a completely different world with a lifestyle that would never be like that of ordinary people. Standing before the majestic mountain, the protagonist declared it was time to return to his home, and as his companion agreed, he silently checked his bowstring, readying himself for the arduous journey. Childhood memories flooded back as the protagonist remembered being 6 years old, given a knife and a small amount of food, only for the child to realize in shock that he had been abandoned in the cold mountains and forests when the food ran out. The poor boy had to lie flat to drink from a stream and eat wild fruits to survive, but his young body reacted violently, causing him to vomit uncontrollably in exhaustion in the middle of the old forest. Unwilling to submit to adversity, those small feet began to walk, marking the beginning of a grueling journey of survival. Day after day, the desperate boy fought to survive, from hiding from the rain to climbing sheer cliffs, despite the gnawing hunger and constant exhaustion that plagued him. As he lay collapsed on the parched ground on the brink of death, the protagonist suddenly saw a strange light in the distance, and in that moment of despair, he realized an important truth. He bitterly understood that the knife was not for hunting, but its true purpose was far crueler, for him to end his own life when there was no escape. In the midst of peril, a ferocious white wolf appeared, growling menacingly, forcing the exhausted protagonist to try and raise his hands in a defensive posture with extreme vigilance in his eyes. The protagonist's tense gaze met the ferocity of the beast as it bared its fangs and opened its mouth, preparing to deliver a fatal bite to its prey. With terrifying speed, the wolf monster lunged to attack the protagonist from behind, creating a powerful impact that put him in a life-or-death situation. Sitting alone by a fire in the snowy forest, he himself was surprised by his own fierce will to live as his eyes blazed with a resilient flame, determined to cling to life until the very end. From then on, he began to learn gratitude for every living creature that sustained him, treasuring every piece of meat, every animal hide that kept him warm, and the schools of fish swimming in the stream. Gradually mastering survival skills, The protagonist proudly held a freshly caught fish in his hand, a testament to his efforts to adapt to the harsh nature. He learned to distinguish edible plants and mushrooms in the deep forest, his eyes growing sharper as he meticulously observed every detail to ensure his safety. In a wooden cabin with a wolf's head hanging on the wall, the protagonist contemplated the law of a life for a life, understanding that to survive, he had to learn to become a true hunter and accept the cruelty of nature. Despite being grateful for and fond of the kind villagers who had taken him in, the protagonist still felt a sense of unease, as something compelled him to fulfill a certain purpose. The long time surviving on the mountain had honed his keen intuition, helping him develop sharp combat senses to face any danger. With weapons on his back, the protagonist steadfastly walked straight into the dense forest, heading towards a dark entrance where the secrets he sought were hidden. After crossing the field of flowers near the mountain peak, the protagonist finally found his target, his eyes widening in astonishment at the scene that unfolded deep within the forest. Before him was a giant, long-feathered monster with black wings, held captive by chains, leaving the protagonist standing motionless before the mysterious creature amidst the dark trees. The giant creature was sound asleep, using an entire large tree as a pillow, making the protagonist look tiny as he observed from a distance. Although he had never encountered it before, his instincts told him that this strange creature possessed terrifying power and would not hesitate to kill humans. Suddenly, the protagonist flinched and turned upon hearing the sharp, cold sound of a weapon being drawn from its sheath by a mysterious man in a fur coat. Without hesitation, the young man immediately turned and fled for his life into the night, dashing through the dense canopy to escape the danger. As he ran, he reasoned that the creature had not actually attacked yet, and he wasn't sure if it had ever killed any humans or animals. The image of the white wolf came to his mind with its philosophy of survival. If the opponent bears no killing intent, you must not allow the desire to kill to arise. To the protagonist, killing for reasons other than survival was a crime, but his eyes hardened with determination. If that creature dared to harm humans or bare its fangs at him, things would be different. A hand tightened its grip on an iron bar, tense, because if that act triggered the life for a life law, a fight to the death would be unavoidable. Looking through the window with eyes blazing with excitement, the protagonist couldn't hide the intense desire burning within him. He wanted to hunt that creature. With eyes sparkling with excitement, the young man began to envision his hunting plan in the mountains, carefully calculating every pitfall, trap, and snare to capture his prey. Meanwhile, a winged figure was hiding among the treetops, waiting patiently and muttering about an opportunity that was sure to come, then shifting slightly, making a small noise. In the dark forest, a blonde girl writhed in pain as her body grotesquely transformed, sprouting black scales, her agonized growls echoing through the space. A white-haired entity with sharp teeth emerged from the darkness, looking down at its opponent with a contemptuous gaze and a mocking laugh. "So you've finally arrived, you little gnats?" Scene change. The convoy of carriages came to a sudden halt, causing a commotion among the passengers. While some complained of hunger, the blonde girl flew into a rage upon hearing about the traffic jam, fearing she would miss her important train. The news of an emergency alert related to magic stunned the group of schoolgirls, who looked at each other with wide, incredulous eyes, unable to believe what they were hearing. Fear quickly turned into extreme excitement as the group found the witch's guidebook, cheering with the belief that if magic existed, then witches must be around here too. From high above, a figure in a white cloak swooped down into the forest at breakneck speed, a cry of "A witch!" tearing through the air, heralding a dramatic entrance. At the snow-covered peak of Druid Mountain, Descaras, the Witch of the Abyss stood majestically and authoritatively with her sword and magic mirror, observing the world below with a cold, sharp gaze. Floating among the mountain peaks, a mysterious figure in a black cloak seemed to have found his target, monologuing with contradiction as he both affirmed it was Aurora and expressed doubt. The girl in the white cloak decided to leave on her own mission, calmly ordering the others to focus on protecting the common people with the demeanor of a commander. Despite Descaras' screams for reinforcements, everyone left her behind, considering her a hindrance, leaving the blonde lady to utter her name in helplessness. In a lavish room filled with mirrors, Mongold the Aureate Witch sat on her throne with a displeased expression, complaining about the trouble that girl was causing. Without hesitation, Mongold issued an urgent order for her subordinate witches to evacuate the residence and erect protective barriers, receiving absolute obedience in reply, echoing from the mirrors. The shadow which emphasized the urgency, knowing that everyone was heading towards Druid Mountain, and asserted that Discaras must subdue the Uroro magic to prevent a terrible catastrophe. Amidst the vast universe, a secret is revealed that in this world, magic is a living entity called Magix that has been in contact with humanity since ancient times. Suddenly, from the void, a talking drop of water emerged with a cheerful sound and casually offered a greeting, marking the appearance of a magic. The water spirit swirled in the air, presenting a harsh challenge to the kneeling girl below. She must drink every last drop of it to possess the power of water magic. The mysterious teacher promised that if she could overcome that arduous trial, he would teach her the incantation to control the currents and wield true power. Other hunters also had to face bizarre demands from the magics, such as embracing burning fire, sleeping beside ice, or walking 1,000 miles with the wind, requiring extreme physical sacrifice. After surviving the life or death trial, the drenched but powerful girl began to command the water droplets, officially seizing the magic's power as her own weapon. Those who have overcome countless brutal trials to seize extraordinary power are called magic hunters, individuals who have gambled with their very lives. Under the starry night sky, the black-haired witch led a spirited procession of flying witches, individuals spoken of by the world with absolute respect and reverence. In a critical situation, the witch urged on the evacuation while simultaneously ordering the protective barriers to be reinforced up to 5 layers, stunning her comrades with the severity of the threat. A stern warning was issued, forbidding anyone from approaching the towering mountain peak. But the main character's eyes were still drawn to that place with deadly curiosity. On a battlefield of monsters, a giant skull-headed creature with black wings faced off intensely against a mysterious character, signaling an earth-shattering showdown. The winged entity buried its face and cried in pain but appeared strangely calm, unsurprised that the one who found it was Discaras, as if it were destined. The blonde-haired, masked figure mockingly called the witch a smitten stalker, causing her to immediately deny it with utter disgust. Losing her composure, the witch gritted her teeth, cursed her opponent to die so she could seize his power, and contemptuously called him a selfish, outdated relic. Faced with the arrogant provocation of his mysterious opponent, King Uroro, far from being angered, enthusiastically declared his readiness to welcome any challenger. He proclaimed himself the Witch King, his sharp gaze fixed on his opponent as he authoritatively questioned the man's chances of victory. He adamantly refused to let any witch possess him, choosing instead to sow destruction by leveling mountains and draining rivers. Amidst the desolate landscape, he coldly took countless lives without any reason. As a magic bearing a deep-seated hatred for humanity, he confessed that he had to kill people to alleviate the boredom of his overly long life. He threatened that if ignored, he would start another bloody massacre for his own amusement. King Uroro arrogantly declared that the trial to possess him was incredibly simple yet deadly. He challenged anyone who desired his power to find a way to make his blazing heart stop beating. Facing the approaching witch, King Uroro spread his giant wings and issued a fierce challenge, taunting her to try and attack if she truly had the guts. With eyes blazing with determination, the witch focused all her concentration into her hand, unleashing the powerful lasered spell to pierce through any obstacle before her. A massive explosion shook the area, sending the crowd of witches into a panic, with one male witch anxiously praying for victory. However, amidst the chaos, Lady Discaras remained strangely calm, ignoring the frantic calls around her. Drawing a sword that radiated dark energy, King Uroro questioned witch Discaras about the unusual feeling she must have noticed. He hinted at the mystery behind his 1,000-year existence without being possessed, before declaring he would enlighten her with a horrifying truth. King Uroro stood tall and authoritative, loudly proclaiming that no woman possessed the ability to harm his heart of stone. King Uroro uttered a bitter taunt, asserting that the witch never stood a chance from the beginning. Overwhelmed, she could only stare with wide eyes in horror and anger, gritting her teeth and muttering helpless curses. King Uroro smiled arrogantly, declaring that even if his opponent were the strongest witch, she could not defy his rules. He stated firmly that as long as a witch was a woman, possessing him was utterly impossible. The protagonist walked cautiously through the dark forest, his hand gripping a dagger, ready to face any danger. He was completely unaware that a mysterious creature was silently stalking him nearby. The witch jumped in fright, breaking out in a cold sweat as she suddenly detected King Uroro's presence right behind her. Both were stunned, creating a moment of sheer astonishment in the forest. The mysterious king looked down curiously, asking which corner the stranger had crawled out from. Without a trace of fear, the protagonist looked up and retorted with a look of confusion mixed with a bit of mockery, asking who the other was in return. Ignoring King Uroro's yelling, the protagonist brazenly cut him off to declare loudly that he was a man. This firm and unexpected assertion left King Uroro gaping in astonishment. The monster unleashed a brutal attack, creating a terrifying pressure that shook everything. Witnessing the horrific scene, the tied-up girl could only scream in helplessness and utter fear. King Uroro suddenly burst up from the ground, seeming surprised by his own appearance. The sound of cracking echoed as he struggled to free himself from the earth, revealing his bizarre form with a skull helmet. King Uroro dazedly realized he had fallen into an elaborate trap combining a deep pit and a snare. He looked around in confusion, wondering what the hell was going on with this hole. The protagonist was plunged into darkness, his eyes wide with terror as he was bound by an invisible force. A mysterious voice warned that the more he struggled, the tighter the bonds would become, making his escape attempt futile. The protagonist frantically brandished his knife, causing King Uroro to shout at him to calm down and keep his distance. Surprisingly, the boy's eyes suddenly sparkled with heart shapes as he innocently asked why the other was staring at him like that. After easily dodging the monster's missed swing, the protagonist smirked, realizing his opponent had just tried to kill him. With an overwhelming presence, he declared a fight to the death, ready to trade a life for a life. The protagonist roared fiercely and charged forward to attack, but the monster reacted in time. A brilliant energy, like feathers, erupted from its hand, creating a powerful shield that blocked the deadly thrust. The protagonist soared through the air in a dramatic pose, his whole body sparkling with a dagger in hand. But then, the cool demeanor vanished, replaced by a blank expression as if he had just forgotten what he was about to do. While the witch was still stunned by the flurry of fluffy feathers, the protagonist irritably realized he was too conspicuous and that something had disappeared. Immediately, the braided-haired witch pulled the protagonist away with a rope, ordering some kid to stand still in the tense situation. The protagonist stared in amazement as the devastating attack was suddenly stopped in mid-air. Beside him, the mysterious witch confirmed that it was her magic barrier that had done it. As the girl tried to warn the panicked man not to move, he was terrified by the protagonist's murderous glare. The young witch calmly explained that looking like he wanted to kill someone was just a habit, which made the girls even more horrified, thinking he was a killing machine. With a face gaunt from stress, the witch reassured herself and gave a strict order not to chant any spells or move. She was keenly aware that her and the kid's current situation was irredeemably dire. When the protagonist activated the glowing object, both he and the little witch racked their brains. In that moment, a name flashed through the protagonist's mind: Lazid, seemingly the key to the magic at play. The protagonist flinched and turned at a strange noise, only to see a small witch appear in a blinding flash of light right behind him. A loud explosion boomed from a distance, heralding the arrival of a stranger approaching at terrifying speed. The black-haired witch frantically raised her weapon to defend, sweat pouring down her face as she sensed the imminent danger. The space was torn apart by a brilliant explosion, with intense, swirling energy overwhelming all other visuals. leaving only a whiteout and the roar of the impact. While the blonde, which was marveling at her power in the mirror, the narrator revealed an immutable rule of this world. Only women possess an aptitude for magic. This is precisely why those who wield this power are exclusively called witches. Beneath the starry night sky, a common belief was reiterated as truth. Men in this world are completely incapable of using magic. However, the storyteller posed a bold hypothesis about the existence of a special magic, one that presented a challenge only a man could overcome. What if, by chance, a man with a superhuman mind and body managed to conquer that trial? Even in the rare event that it happened, the probability of that man acquiring the magic was a mere 0.001%. Hearing this, the protagonist exclaimed that it was basically impossible. A brilliant light erupted in the darkness, affirming a mystical truth that in this world, magic still exists and is alive. Special women called witches are tasked with hunting and defeating magics, living magical entities, to seize their power. Descaras, the greatest and most perfect witch in the world, used her unparalleled talent to confront the demon Uroro. She overwhelmed and nearly annihilated this vile magical entity. However, the tables turned when Uroro revealed he was a special magic that could not be defeated by women. He laughed triumphantly at the cornered Descaras, gloating that he had cheated to win. But just then, a foolish kid rushed in from nowhere and did the impossible. To the witch's astonishment, that boy somehow defeated Uroro and claimed his power. Holding a crude drawing depicting the chaotic scene, the black-haired girl concluded with frustration that this was precisely the ridiculous situation they were currently trapped in. The mysterious girl looked down at the boy locked in the cage and asked if he understood everything that had just happened. The boy confirmed he did but hesitated, wanting to argue about a few details before her gaze made him back down. Floating in the vast emptiness on a levitating stone platform, the man in the cage finally spoke up. He politely asked the woman lounging outside if she could explain why he was locked in this birdcage. The witch sternly questioned the protagonist, asking if he had truly forgotten what he had done. The protagonist broke into a cold sweat, looking at her with a mix of surprise and fear as if he had completely lost his memory of the event. The witch seriously explained to the protagonist that the magic he had just obtained was King Uroro, the incredibly dangerous ultimate amplification magic. It was a legendary power that witches had coveted and failed to obtain for thousands of years. True to its name, this magic could take any magical effect, no matter how small, and amplify it to its maximum potential. The illustration showed a tiny spark of fire exploding into a destructive beam of energy thanks to this power. The witch emphasized that this power required no practice. One just had to recite the correct incantation. However, she expressed immense disappointment that the ultimate weapon aimed at the magical world was now in the hands of a kid who knew nothing about magic. The girl revealed that the price for using the power was falling unconscious for 3 days. The protagonist, having just woken up, was shocked to realize he had been in a deep sleep for that long, and winced in pain upon learning that this pet of hers had slapped him silly to wake him up. The witch reported the protagonist's failed attempts at magic, where a sound charm was useless and a revival charm only made plants flourish. After a moment of regret for not witnessing it himself, the protagonist quickly regained his serious demeanor and presented 2 options for their current situation. The black-haired girl delivered a cold ultimatum: either become her companion, though she slipped and called him a servant, or flee in desperation as the whole world hunts you down. The witch revealed the shocking truth that the protagonist was likely the first male witch in history, making him a coveted target for every researcher in the world. She also shrewdly noticed his reaction to the word servant. The girl warned the protagonist not to be foolish and run away, lest he wants to end his life as a lab rat. The threat painted a vision of being dissected all day, causing the boy to scream in terror. Ignoring the contemptuous laughter of the mysterious entity, the black-haired girl offered a deal to protect the boy from the fate of a lab rat. She frankly admitted her true goal was to keep Uroro, who was trapped inside him, close by her side. Surprisingly, half of the protagonist's face was shrouded in shadow, forming a sinister smile as it cast its vote for the option to flee. The sudden transformation and Yuroro's overwhelming presence stunned both the braided-haired girl and the boy himself. Two shadow entities appeared, whispering conflicting words into the heroine's ear. While one manipulator warned her about the deceitful witch, the other shadow giggled, amicably offering to help the protagonist escape the world that was against them. The protagonist was startled by a loud noise, and before he could recover, he was berated by an angry black-haired man from behind. The man swung a staff, yelling that the line "You startled me" should have been his. While the girl and the blonde boy calmly discussed beheadings and killing intent, the protagonist was utterly horrified. He screamed in disgust as he witnessed something get its head chopped off only to return, vowing he would cut it off immediately if it grew on his own shoulder. The witch coldly exposed Yuroro's malicious scheme, who was trying to incite the child against the Witches' Association to bring about his own death. She looked bored by his predictable ploy and told him not to waste his effort. The protagonist resolutely raised his knife, believing that the master's death would release the magic according to the rules. However, King Yuroro appeared and mocked that naive thought, contemptuously calling him a snot-nosed monkey and implying that he wouldn't play by the usual rules. The woman described witches as barbaric hunters of magics, which surprised the protagonist. Immediately, the shadow creature reacted violently, hissing as it refused to cooperate with the enemy to hunt its own kind. A heated argument broke out as the woman accused the magic of being destructive, while the shadow magic belittled humans as inferior monkeys. He went ballistic when he heard the girl mock him as an old relic and assert that nowadays, many magics cooperate with humans. The protagonist curiously pointed towards the girl with the pigtails and asked if there were many magics like her. This innocent question stunned the woman beside him, her eyes widening and sparkling as if she had just realized something important. Like a light bulb turning on, the woman excitedly explained that the world was full of powerful and cunning magics to hunt. Her enthusiastic description made the boy in the cage look up with a mix of curiosity and excitement. With the serious demeanor of an expert, the girl provided precise statistics. Of the more than 3,000 confirmed magics, only a small fraction had been possessed by witches. Amidst the majestic natural scenery, the narration echoed with promise, a reminder that this vast world still concealed countless mysterious, undiscovered magics. These mythical creatures might be hiding in the fiery hearts of ferocious volcanoes, or they could be lurking in the silent, bottomless abysses of the ocean, where sunlight cannot reach. They might rain from the sparkling heights of the sky, shining like stars. Or perhaps, they are hiding right in a dusty, forgotten corner of someone's study, waiting to be found. Just as she opened her mouth to criticize someone else's messy room and lifestyle, the cloaked girl was hit with a dose of reality. When the other girl calmly revealed that she had seen her house, her superior attitude instantly vanished, replaced by a shudder of utter horror. Sitting alone in the vast emptiness, the protagonist gripped his dagger, accepting a fateful declaration from a mysterious, echoing voice. He was a hunter. Although men typically have no connection to magic, by some strange miracle, the protagonist had acquired Yuroro. This entity granted him immense power, reflected in his determined eyes and overwhelming presence. Standing before the cage, the female which declared that with his current power, the protagonist could absolutely hunt magics. While he was still annoyed, a nearby magic spoke up in outrage, calling her a cunning manipulator. The magic panicked, realizing the mysterious girl was trying to persuade the protagonist to do something insane. He feared that unleashing this snot-nosed monkey into the magical world would cause a catastrophe, while the protagonist sat in his cage with a confused expression. With eyes wide with determination, the protagonist loudly declared that he would do it. However, he immediately looked bewildered, as if he had just realized the strangeness or surprise in his own words. The protagonist agreed to join but set a condition that he would think it over after hunting a few preys. Admitting he still didn't fully understand the world of witches and magic, the black-haired girl listened calmly, while the magic beside her looked furious. Immediately after a crisp snap of the fingers, the magic stared in disbelief at its failure and slumped down in dejection. The girl with the buns cheered victoriously, teasing the magic for its pathetic loss. Receiving a flood of messages through the mirror, the girl urgently told everyone to leave the mountain immediately. While one boy cheered for being free, the protagonist just sat silently, arms crossed with a thoughtful and unenthusiastic expression. Standing before the mirror, the girl asked about the revival spell and began to chant Parthian to activate the rebirth. However, her eyes remained fixed on her reflection as she muttered about sealing or preventing something. The protagonist appeared with an overwhelming presence, radiating powerful magical energy and confidently declaring he was ready, all under the observation of a magic. The witch girl stared in horror, sweat pouring down her face as she witnessed a shocking event beyond imagination, leaving her speechless. Ignoring all warnings, the protagonist brazenly declared he would try using this new magic. This act sent the girl into a complete panic, screaming for him to stop and calling him an idiot for ignoring what she had just said. The protagonist smiled brightly, announcing he would be sleeping soundly for the next 3 days and entrusting everything to the girl. Before she could recover from his irresponsibility, she had to face his intention to make amends before he left, leaving her even more stunned. From high above, the protagonist dove down like a lightning bolt, delivering a fierce attack on the furry creature below. The creature, in a defensive posture, could only utter a belated apology that it had done him wrong. While the little witch frantically wanted to fix the mistake herself, the protagonist decisively unleashed a powerful, amplified version of Parthian, enveloping the space in a brilliant surge of energy. In the middle of the forest, the protagonist stood silently as massive roots cracked the earth and surged upwards violently. The scene became mystical with the appearance of glowing creatures and fantastical vegetation all around. The 2 young witches and the other students looked up with expressions of awe and admiration. Before them was a breathtakingly vibrant magical forest, where birds and butterflies fluttered around radiant trees. The natural scenery unfolded, majestic and serene, with a giant ancient tree standing tall amidst the mountains, adorned by gently falling leaves and butterflies dancing in the wind. At this point, the magic had no idea what to do with the protagonist. It just stared at him and called him a stupid monkey, a mirror which screamed, questioning the sudden appearance of the forest. But the protagonist was still groggy and not fully awake. The black-haired girl had to carry him on her back, the thought of abandoning the troublesome guy in the forest crossing her mind, even as he continued to snore. On the peaceful Mount Barakan, chirping birds were suddenly startled in alarm. An unusual presence had shattered the tranquil atmosphere of the clear blue sky. A terrifying explosion suddenly erupted, flinging everything around and creating violent shockwaves that spread throughout the space. The chapter opens with the image of a giant fox monster, surrounded by lightning, lying in wait on a rock in a desolate land. This is Reiko magic, the target of the 3rd grueling hunt. The giant wolf monster savored the smell of scorched flesh with savage delight. Amidst the smoky, desolate landscape, it bared its sharp teeth, enjoying the remnants of the destruction it had just caused. The lightning fox smugly recounted that in just 2 weeks since its appearance, it had incinerated most of the animals in the area. It seemed surprised, even somewhat disappointed, that no witch had dared to venture near to subdue it. Amidst a field of small creature corpses, the mysterious fox noted the absolute silence of the place. At the same time, a giant foot slammed down on the ground, its owner scouring the area in search of a human village. With a mischievous and malicious expression, the fox spirit decided to leave. Its entire body radiating deadly electrical currents, it declared it was time to find and roast some humans for fun. The power wielder proclaimed to be the flame born from lightning, describing its brutal strength. It boasted of its ability to turn into an electric current that runs through a victim's body, boiling their blood and cooking them from the inside. The fox roared, asserting that its terrifying nature would make anyone's hair stand on end, quite literally. It proudly declared itself to be a most powerful and horrifying magic. The nine-tailed fox devised a cruel plan to create a tragedy that would terrify even the mages. It aimed to burn down an entire village to cement its name as the greatest and most wicked lightning magic in history. Standing before the giant spirit beast in the forest, the protagonist looked up with eyes burning with determination. He loudly declared that this encounter would be merely the opening page of his own legend. The fox demon noticed a smudge on the gem on its chest and raised a hand to wipe it, but accidentally triggered a brilliant flash of light. Startled for a moment, it quickly reassured itself that it was just its imagination. The lightning fox issued a harsh challenge. Whoever wanted to possess it must steal its heart stone without being struck by lightning even once. The fox, observing from below, smirked, remarking that it was a cruel but interesting trial. The fox gloated, imagining the tormented faces of the failed witches, but then realized it was getting too carried away. It took a deep breath, trying to calm its fluctuating emotions, ignoring the protagonist hanging upside down behind it. The fox was startled when it heard strange melodies wafting through the air. Instantly, a loud shout pointed out the source, drawing attention to the black-haired girl sitting and singing leisurely in the deep forest. Amidst a carpet of pure white flowers, the black-haired girl sat alone, lost in a melodious tune. The scene around her exuded a sense of peace, a stark contrast to the dangers lurking in the forest. The fox smirked slyly upon spotting the black-haired girl, seeing it as a golden opportunity to test the waters before heading to the village. Meanwhile, the girl continued to hum carefree, completely unaware of the covetous eyes watching her from the cliff. The fox approached with palpable killing intent, calling out to its human prey. It decided not to kill the girl immediately but to toy with her to satisfy its sadistic urges, marking her as the first victim in its brutal hunt. The fox lunged at the girl from behind with terrifying speed, from a direction where it believed she was unaware of its presence. Dashing out of the darkness at lightning speed, Reiko announced her fearsome title. She prepared to deliver a blow of punishment or judgment, her face showing unstoppable determination. The fox revealed its true form as a giant monster hovering in the air, lightning crackling around its body. Its appearance was an omen of destruction, spreading terror to all beings below. Suddenly, a hand gripped a rope and pulled it sharply. The fox's eyes flew wide open in astonishment, not understanding what was happening as it was abruptly affected. The protagonist reacted with lightning speed, ducking to avoid the surprise attack that had just ripped through the air. With his weapon at the ready, he was on high alert for the newly revealed danger, sweat beginning to form on his brow. A precise whip crack struck the monster squarely in the face, sending it reeling in pain and surprise. The fox was stunned, and before it could comprehend what had happened, a strange object crashed to the ground in front of it, making the situation even more confusing. The spiky-haired teenager's eyes lit up like shooting stars, his mouth agape with sheer excitement. He let out a cheer of delight upon discovering something incredibly interesting before him. The protagonist enthusiastically hugged a part of the giant magic's body, remarking with surprise that it was much lighter than its massive appearance suggested. In contrast to his excitement, the girl sitting beside him merely looked indifferent, hardly interested. While another character was excitedly discussing the successful magic trap, the protagonist was contemplating what to do with the prey. He intended to kill and eat it but was vehemently opposed by the shadow magic, forcing him to reluctantly change his mind. The magic covered its face, lamenting the pathetic state of the poor creature before it, unable to believe what it was seeing. Just then, the girl appeared with a weary expression, recognizing this troublesome old acquaintance. Despite the fox being painfully choked, the protagonist casually used it as a visual aid to explain the mechanics of a snare trap. He enthusiastically demonstrated how to tie the knots with meticulous detail as if teaching a survival skills class. The protagonist passionately explained the strange behavior of foxes, stating that they always prioritize pouncing on prey in a northeastern direction. He confidently proposed a plan to set traps based on this habit, despite the girl beside him giving him a skeptical look. While the girl smugly believed her elegant beauty was an irresistible lure, the protagonist was focused on the cloth soaked in wood vinegar in his hand. They stared at each other blankly, completely ignoring the conceited young lady's delusion. Realizing the fox had a keen sense of smell, the controller used an extremely pungent odor to take it down. The fox recoiled in discomfort, while the shadow magic standing by could only helplessly accept the somewhat crude but effective method. A grand confrontation between a witch and a fire spirit was depicted, but it was immediately dismissed by the shadow magic. It grumbled that things shouldn't have happened this way, while the narrator passionately discussed the art of staging, leaving a small girl to watch in bewilderment. Caught red-handed practicing lines for a cool entrance, the protagonist quickly changed the subject to hunting theory and the importance of ambushing. However, his expression suddenly hardened with anger as he mentioned that the magic had killed for mere entertainment. The protagonist thoughtfully analyzed the monster's crime, asserting that it didn't kill for survival, but only to satisfy its cruel sadism. He coldly concluded that it was murder, and one who treats another's life as a joke has no right to complain when they become the target. The black-haired girl rested her chin on her hand, remarking with interest on the boy's different perspective on magics. In contrast, the shadow magic beside her became extremely agitated and tense, breaking into a nervous sweat at his point of view. The narrator explained that to witches, magics are fearsome monsters to be wary of. When confronting an entity like Reiko, all attention is focused on the terrifying lightning power it possesses. But the protagonist was completely different. Instead of rushing into battle, he patiently spent a whole day observing the magic in its natural environment, meticulously noting every habit to find its critical weakness. With a knife in hand, the protagonist resolved to hunt them like any other animal. In his eyes, magics were not gods or supernatural monsters, but simply living creatures that needed to be conquered. When the protagonist eagerly demanded to kill the sleeping monster, the girls hastily stopped him, fearing the association's reaction. They instructed him to quickly take the pelt and the heart gem, but as soon as the gem was pulled out, a massive explosion erupted violently. The protagonist stared blankly at the rectangular gemstone floating before him. The sparkling light emanating from the stone reflected in his amazed eyes. Holding the strange crystalline object he had just obtained, the protagonist couldn't hide his curiosity. He turned it over and over, wondering what this shimmering thing with mysterious characters carved on it could be. The black-haired girl explained that the magic stone was proof that he had subdued the magic and warned him to keep it safe. When the protagonist asked why Yororo didn't turn into a stone, she brushed it off, asserting that it was just a rare exception. Despite Reiko's smug boasting about being a treasure, the protagonist didn't hesitate to call him dirty and rude. The black-haired girl quickly explained about the incantation carved inside the stone used to activate Reiko, while simultaneously covering the protagonist's mouth to prevent him from accidentally reading it aloud. While the protagonist was still scratching his head in confusion, the black-haired girl was cheering excitedly. She was certain that their recent victory was more than enough to smooth over any troubles, raising her fist in celebration of their success. Lightly touching the mirror's surface, the white-robed woman's attitude did a complete 180. She screamed furiously at her reflection, demanding to know the whereabouts of someone named Descaras with unrestrained rage. The long-haired witch complained in frustration about the chaotic paperwork she had to deal with as a result. However, the girl in the mirror, the one who caused the trouble, merely offered a cursory apology before immediately ordering her to return and report at once. In the magnificent capital of Natalie, the woman with glasses issued orders through a mirror with a stern expression, emphasizing that everyone was waiting with bated breath. She demanded that the black-haired girl, who was wearily carrying a small creature, bring the young man back at all costs, with no room for failure. Standing at the pinnacle of the Mantinal Witches Association, Lady Mantinal exuded an air of elegance and authority that made even her spirit beast wonder. Together, they looked down upon the vast city, where the next developments of the story were about to begin.